Hello everyone, my name is Anjan Pakhin. I'm the data analyst responsible for analyzing medical staffing across the US states. This topic has become increasingly important in recent times. Our company has been facing challenges in providing proactively balanced medical staffs, especially during the influenza season when the demand for healthcare professionals tends to rise sharply. At first glance, the solution might appear simple. One might say, just send more staffs to the areas where the demand is highest. However, the situation is more complex. We cannot just send staffs randomly. There are a few important reasons for that. First, we have limited staffs. Currently, we are unable to hire more personnel due to resource constraints. Second, we want to avoid both overstaffing and understaffing in any state. Making staffing decisions based purely on assumption can result in major inefficiencies. In order to address this problem, we must answer two important questions. Where is the demand highest? And when is the additional staff needed? We believe that people over the age of 65, in other words, the vulnerable population, are the ones most affected by influenza. I ask you to keep these two key questions in mind as we walk through this analysis together. Let us begin with our assumption, better call it hypothesis. Vulnerable populations are mostly impacted by influenza. To test this hypothesis, we need to analyze data, specifically population data categorized into age groups. This allows us to determine how influenza affects different age groups and helps. Fortunately, we had access to trusted and comprehensive data sources. These includes the CDC's dataset on influenza deaths by geography, by states, and the US Census Bureau's data on population by geography, time, age, and gender, covering the years 2009 to 2017. Let us begin with a general overview of how vulnerable population and death rates are distributed across the United States. In the map, we can see the distribution of total population, total vulnerable population, and total blue deaths for each state. The bar chart shows the top 10 states with the largest vulnerable populations. We can see the corresponding numbers by hovering the mouse above the map of a bar chart. We will go through both charts in detail in later sections. Let us test our hypothesis. As I already mentioned above, that elderly people are most impacted by influenza. To examine this, we need to test the correlation between vulnerable population and their influenza-related deaths. That means whether both variables are related each other. The first diagram on the left compares populations with flu deaths of vulnerable population. The diagonal line in the chart represents a strong positive correlation. This means that as the vulnerable population in a state increases, the number of flu deaths increases as well. The size of dots represents total population and the color intensity represents vulnerable population in its state. By hovering the mouse over each dot, we can see the different types of values. When we hover the mouse over the diagonal line, we can see two specific values. First, R squared, which tells us how well the data points follow a straight line. Closer the value to 1, the stronger the relationship between two comparing variables. Second, p-value. If the value is smaller than 0.05, there is real strong relationship, and the value is equal or greater than 0.05, the relationship may not be real or true. In our case, R squared of 0.8851 and p-value of 0.001, the correlation is statistically strong. That means the relationship between two variables is strong and true. If you like to know deeper what R squared or p squared p-values are, please do not hesitate to reach out. I will be happy to emphasize it in extra technical session. The second diagram on the right shows yearly flu death from 2009 to 2017, divided into two groups. The red line represents deaths in the vulnerable age group, those over 65, and the blue line represents deaths in the non-vulnerable age group, those under. This visual clearly demonstrates that flu deaths in the vulnerable groups are nearly double those in the non-vulnerable group. With this, we are able to confirm our hypothesis. People over the age of 65 are indeed more vulnerable to influenza. Now that we have identified the most affected group, the next step is to identify which states are at higher risk. To do this, I calculated the percentage of vulnerable population for each state and plotted in the bar chart on the left-hand side of the slide. For example, Florida has the highest percentage of vulnerable population, with around 18% of its total population. On the top right, you can see a map that shows the number of flu deaths per 100,000 residents by state. This helps us understand where influenza has had the greatest impact historically. By combining these two indicators, the percentage of the vulnerable population and the flu death rate, I was able to assign a risk level to each state. In the bottom right diagram, you can see that states such as Vermont, Florida, and Delaware fall into the high-risk category. Interestingly, California, despite having a large total population, is classified as a low-risk state. Now that we know which states are most affected, we should explore whether influenza follows a seasonal pattern. The top line chart shows monthly flu deaths for the top 10 states between 2009 and 2017. It reveals a clear seasonal trend. Flu deaths indeed tend to peak during the winter months, particularly from October to March. Yes, from October to March. The area chart at the bottom left provides a more detailed view of the seasonal pattern. Now, I would like to summarize our key findings. Found that there is a strong correlation between vulnerable population and influenza-related deaths. This means that states with more elderly residents are more likely to experience higher death rates during the flu season. Our analysis identified two major risk factors that must be considered in staffing decisions. The first risk factor is the flu death rate. States like Wyoming, Alaska, and Vermont have historically experienced the highest flu-related death rates. The second risk factor is the size of the vulnerable population. States such as Florida, Maine, and Vermont have a high percentage of residents over the age of 65, which makes them more susceptible to severe outcomes from the influenza. In addition, we confirmed that flu deaths tend to peak from October to March, which is essential for planning purposes. Based on these insights, I would like to offer the following recommendations. We should begin deploying additional staff as early as late October, especially in high-risk states such as Wyoming, Vermont, and Florida. We should aim to maintain elevated staffing levels through the end of March to match the seasonal patterns of flu activity. We should prioritize states that show both a high flu death rate and a large elderly population, for example, California, Florida, and Vermont. We should also consider using early flu testing results and regional data to adjust staffing level dynamically as the season progresses. Lastly, we should work on enhancing emergency capacity in regions that are likely to experience the highest impact. After providing these recommendations, I would like to propose a few next steps that could strengthen these analyses further. We could perform further analysis using real-time data, including hospitalizations, testing rates, and vaccine coverage, to make staffing plans even more responsive. We could build a regional dashboard to monitor changes in vulnerable population size and flu outbreak patterns in near real time. And we could expand this analysis to include more recent data beyond 2017, which would help us identify current trends and make the analysis more relevant to today's conditions. Thank you very much for your time and attention. If you have any questions or would like me to elaborate further, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would be happy to provide more detail.